Blood Moon Chronicles. Chapter 19. The Infinite Loop. So here we are, standing at the base of an ancient obelisk in what's either a desert or some kind of existential wasteland, with all the aesthetic flair of an abandoned parking lot and none of the asphalt. I'm not sure which one is scarier. The obelisk looms over us like a bad idea you just can't take back. Black, smooth as glass under a sun that refuses to set properly, because apparently time forgot its own schedule. The air smells vaguely of burnt coffee beans and old socks, and the wind carries whispers in languages I've never heard but somehow understand. Come closer. Come closer. It's like listening to static on a broken radio during a thunderstorm. It makes my skin itch. Rhonda kneels by one of the bas reliefs carved into the stone and runs her fingers along it, humming low under her breath. She's not a religious woman. She once told me she only went to church when her mother had that heart condition she never lived long enough to call out. But there was something reverent in the way she touched those carvings. "This isn't just decoration," she murmured. "It's instructions." Bubba, ever the cigar-chomping optimist, grunted and lit up another smoke with a flame that didn't quite reach his lips before he flicked it into the sand like it owed him money. He leaned against the obelisk and grinned through the plume of gray smoke. "Instructions for what?" "For getting eaten," I said, not because I believed her, but because I wanted to hear myself sound like a reasonable person in this exact moment. Bubba laughed, the kind of laugh that sounds like it's been filed down into a smoother shape by years of poor decisions and too much whiskey. "Man, if you ask me, we just need more lighting." He gestured at one of his friends, Mike, who was currently using the obelisk as a backdrop for some kind of impromptu performance art piece, involving yelling at nothing in particular while holding his hands out like he was conducting an invisible orchestra. Rhonda stood up and looked around. "There's something down there," she said, her voice steady but low enough that only we could hear it. I knew what she meant because I felt it too, this pull toward the ground beneath our feet, like gravity had gotten tired of doing its job properly and was just leaning into the idea of dragging us all the way to hell, or at least a really long tunnel. Mike stopped mid-performance and pointed at the base of the obelisk with great dramatic flair. "Aha! The entrance, We followed his finger to what looked like an old trapdoor set into the ground, half buried in sand that felt unnaturally warm under our shoes. It had a symbol carved on it, something circular with lines radiating out from its center, and at first glance it resembled one of those no-smoking signs you see in hospitals if you squint just right. Rhonda crouched again and started brushing the sand away with her hands until we could see the edges more clearly. Then she reached into her pocket and pulled out a small knife, our letter opener from earlier, and pressed it against one of those lines on the symbol. The metal hissed as if it were being cleaned by an invisible hand, then suddenly sank into the stone. Bubba whistled through his teeth. "That's new." The trapdoor slid open with a groan that echoed louder than it should have in this flat landscape, and a gust of cold air whooshed up at us like someone had opened a freezer door on another planet. The smell was worse down there, like burnt hair mixed with something sweet and metallic. It wasn't just bad, it was alive, pulsing through the stone as if the obelisk itself were breathing. Rhonda looked back at me and raised an eyebrow. "You coming?" I didn't answer. I couldn't. My voice had gone off to hide somewhere while I stared into that darkness, waiting for something familiar or comforting to pop up in my mind. Instead, all I saw was the way Mike's face changed when he looked down there too, how his eyes went wide and unfocused like they were trying to remember a name but couldn't. Bubba laughed again, this time louder, more desperate almost. "Hey, fellas!" He kicked some sand into the opening until it hit something solid below. The sound was hollow, not like wood or metal but something in between, something that should have been impossible given the laws of physics and whatever else I've forgotten since high school. Rhonda sighed and stepped forward first, disappearing into that black hole while Bubba followed with his usual swagger. Mike hesitated for a second before jumping down as if he were auditioning for some kind of weird stunt show about falling into infinite loops. I stayed above until the last possible moment because I figured someone should be watching out for us from up here, just in case we needed another reminder that this whole situation was absolutely bananas. Then, of course, I had to go down too. The stairs were stone and cold under my boots, curving downward like they wanted me to trip so badly it hurt. There wasn't any light except what filtered through the trapdoor above us, which meant everything looked gray or black depending on how far away things were from that sliver of daylight. The walls had more carvings, these ones even stranger than before, with figures doing strange things, and symbols that made my head ache if I stared at them too long. We reached a chamber about halfway down where the air smelled different, like it had been soaked in blood then left out to dry until only the memory of what happened remained. The floor was littered with relics, some so old they looked like they should have crumbled into dust by now but were still perfectly intact and waiting for someone new to find them. There were broken mirrors here too, shards of glass scattered across the stone floor, each one reflecting something slightly off, like reflections in a dream where your house is upside down or your cat has 3 tails. One mirror showed me my face stretched unnaturally wide into a smile that wasn't mine anymore, while another reflected Bubba holding his cigar sideways like he was trying to make it fit in the wrong universe. Rhonda knelt by one of them and picked up what looked like an old coin, except when she held it up against her palm it shifted colors rapidly between gold, silver, copper, and something that glinted like bone.
"This is real,"
she whispered.
"All this. It's real."
Mike had started muttering to himself again, something about how we were all just characters in some other guy's story, and maybe we should try writing our own ending if we wanted a better chance of surviving. Bubba rolled his eyes.
"Man, stop trying so hard."
Then he said something else that made me realize I was missing part of what he meant, like there was another layer to the words that only he could see, because maybe he wasn't entirely here anymore either. We kept going deeper until we reached a second chamber where everything changed completely. The air went colder and heavier, pressing against my skin like it had weight now, while the walls seemed closer than before despite being made of exactly the same stone. This place didn't look abandoned or forgotten, it looked carefully prepared for whoever was coming next, like someone had been here recently and wasn't done with their plans. And that's when we saw him. Victor himself, standing by what looked like an altar of some sort covered in symbols from before but this time filled with blood instead of sand. His eyes were bright and hungry behind the shadows cast across his face as he grinned at us with his own teeth, which somehow managed to look both inviting and terrifying while holding something that sparkled, like it was made not just of metal but also memories. He looked around at each one of us carefully before speaking, his voice smooth enough to coat your throat if you listened too closely.
"Welcome home,"
he said simply, almost kindly, as though we were all long-lost family members who had only ever been separated by bad choices and worse luck. Bubba laughed again, but this time there was no humor in it whatsoever. It was just noise escaping from a man who knew exactly how badly everything would end tonight if things kept going like they were. Rhonda looked back at him briefly, then turned her attention fully on Victor, gripping the letter opener so tightly that I could see the knuckles turning white beneath her skin.
And I stood there thinking about how none of us had ever really belonged anywhere except here now, where we were all just trying not to be eaten by our own mistakes, while hoping someone somewhere might write a better ending for all of us. But then again, maybe endings weren't supposed to exist in places like this. Maybe everything was just meant to keep looping until you learned how to play the game properly or gave up altogether, and either way you ended up exactly where you were always going to end up anyway. Please stay tuned for the next installment of Blood Moon Chronicles. Oh, by the way, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. I'll see you soon, my friends.